We are on property that is owned by the Faust family, and the Fausts have owned this property for almost 100 years, and they've been farming and taking care of it, and they voluntarily enrolled it in our Wetland Reserve program. So the value of this being in a Wetland Reserve easement program is that it protects its intrinsic values, its habitat values, its aesthetic values, its resource values for generations to come.
My father was looking for a way to be able to pass on some of the property to all of the family. Most of the farm ground I ended up with myself and farm it up on the upper benches, which is more suited for farm ground. But the bottom land he wanted to pass on to all of the kids. It allows us an opportunity to kind of get together, come up with some common goals, and go ahead and implement them. That I think is really facilitated in doing that.
The Wetland Reserve Program agreement was signed in 2015 between the landowners and the other parties. And since then, we've been implementing a series of improvements to restore and enhance its natural character and value. One of the first things that was done was on the western end of the property along the floodplain to eradicate the existing vegetation and to plant that into native bunch grasses. The second phase of the project addressed the wetlands. We have a natural wetland here that had been degraded over the years.
There was a big push to get the maximum acreage into production. Everybody kind of realized that, maybe we went a little too far that direction. And then so there's been a big recognition that we need to bring back the wetland function, where it's feasible and possible.
And so it was important as a foundation for the rest of the improvements was to be able to restore and enhance those wetlands. And so what we're able to do is to restore a series of ponds that fringe between the active floodplain and the river terrace. Taking a look at the hydrology, seeing where the water is coming from, where it's emanating from the ground and how it's flowing through the system. Understanding why this waterway stays ice-free all year, and making sure that whatever we did was not going to endanger that, was going to enhance that condition.
So where we're standing right now is kind of the headwaters of a warm water spring which feeds the wetland complex here. This was restored in the winter of 2018, where we basically re-accessed these springs that are all around us here so that we have a continuous flow from the headwaters now to the slough downstream and the Flathead River.
Yeah, the next phase of this project is to plant vegetation in the upland areas, places that flood periodically with appropriate species that are successful in this area. To plant more species on the fringe of where the water floods and dries up, so sedges and rushes and those sort of things, and then also plant trees and shrubs to provide the final component of a terrestrial habitat. And you can see an existing wheel line on it. The idea is to leave that wheel line on the land to help establish the seeding, and then remove the wheel line once the seeding is established.
I'd say this seeding exceeded my expectations. I'm really happy with it. We're hoping this field over here to the right of us right now will look similar to this when it's done. Although when we do plant that one over there, it has a little bit different flooding cycles, a little more frequently than this does. So we'll be using a different combination of grasses and forbs in some of that, but it will probably end up looking pretty similar to this. You have a whole variety of wildlife here. You have literally thousands upon thousands of waterfowl that migrate to this area and overwinter on their warm water springs that stay open year-round, and it's a critically important wintering habitat for waterfowl. And you have a lot of large ungulates who use this property, so you have deer and elk.
We have a lot of different species, I think a little more than just one or two to look at. And then also we farm here, we live here, we're trying to make a living here. We've got families and people to take care of. And so I think that's probably where the biggest fit came in.
The Natural Resources Conservation Service has a knack for working with private landowners and developing relationships, learning the landowner's goals, and pulling from our suite of tools to help them achieve their conservation goals.
With NRCS, they're not just wildlife or just this species. They're looking at a lot of different species, and they're looking to partner with people and make them successful on the farm also at the same time.